The phone rang on Thursday morning as I sat at my sewing machine sewing a skirt for Doña Marta. Outside the window of my little house in Santa Elena, a new day was just beginning, the sun barely peeking through the branches of an old mango tree in the yard. These mornings were my favorite. Quiet, peaceful, just the measured tapping of the needle on the fabric. I had been working at home for years, ever since Raphael died, and my survivor's pension was no longer enough to support a normal life. Sewing allowed me to remain independent and not have to ask for help from my daughter, who was barely making ends meet. I picked up the phone, holding it between my ear and shoulder. Mommy? Yolanda's voice sounded strange, like she was crying or had just stopped crying. What's wrong, daughter? I put the needle away and concentrated fully on the conversation. In 32 years of motherhood, I had learned to recognize every nuance of my only daughter's voice. Now there was a panic in it that she was trying to hide. Mom, we're in trouble. Big trouble. My heart sank. I pictured a car accident, a hospital, something with my job, anything but what I heard next. Last night, Yolanda was choking. The house burned down, the one we rented from Mr. Ramirez. It burned down almost completely. I was silent, trying to comprehend what I was hearing. The house burned down? How is that possible? Yolanda and Osvaldo had been renting a small house on the outskirts of town for a year and a half. I've only been there once when they first moved in. It's a simple house, nothing special. 2 rooms, a kitchen, a small yard. But for a young family, it's adequate. Osvaldo forgot to put out his cigarette, continued the daughter in a trembling voice. It fell on the sofa and we were drunk and fell asleep. We woke up to the smoke. We barely had time to run out. Drunk. Of course we were. I closed my eyes and tried to keep my irritation at bay. Over the past 6 months, Yolanda had mentioned alcohol more and more often, whether it was at the store after work with her coworkers or at the weekend with Osvaldo. I thought it was just youth, a desire to relax after hard work as a cashier in a grocery store. Now I realized it was more serious than that. God, the important thing is that you're alive, I said, trying to speak calmly. And the rest can be worked out. No, Mom, you don't understand. Senor Ramirez is suing us. The police say we have to pay him compensation for the house. 8 million pesos. 8 million. Where did we get that kind of money? 8 million. That amount hit me over the head with a hammer. I quickly calculated in my mind that I had 7,600,000 pesos in my account. Money I'd been saving all my life, first with Raphael and then alone. We had saved a little each month, living modestly, saving for everything. After my husband died, I kept saving, working day and night at the sewing machine. And if we don't pay? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Prison, Mom. We'll go to jail. The lawyer said it's negligent arson with serious consequences, at least 3 years each. Yolanda cried into the phone. I could hear Osvaldo mumbling something unintelligible in the background, apparently also in despair. Though with him you could never tell what he was feeling, the guy was always taciturn and withdrawn. I did a quick calculation in my mind. 7,600,000 on the account, plus Mom's gold earrings. For them we'll give 1,400, maybe 500 if I'm lucky. That's exactly 8 million. All my savings, all my financial security. But my daughter will be free. Listen to me carefully, I said as firmly as I could. Pack your things and come to my place. Tonight, I'll find the money. Mom, but 8 million, it'll come, I said. Come. Thank you, Mom. I knew you wouldn't leave us. There was something in her voice that made me uneasy. The relief was too quick, too complete. Like she knew in advance that I'd agree to help. Like she was counting on it. After I hung up, I sat still for a long time, staring at the unfinished skirt. The sewing machine was silent. The sunbeam had shifted and was now falling on the floor next to my feet. 8 million pesos. That's all I have. Absolutely everything. After this payment, I will be left with virtually no means of livelihood. Only my pension and my sewing income, and that's barely enough to live on. But what could I do? This is my only daughter. I can't let her go to prison. I got up and went to the kitchen to make coffee. My hands shook as I poured water into the old aluminum coffee maker, a gift from Raphael for our 10th wedding anniversary. My late husband had worked as a mechanic in a machine shop for 20 years, making a good wage by local standards, and I sewed to order. We lived modestly, but we saved every peso. First, we saved for a house, then for our old age. Rafael always said, Estella, you have to have a safety net. No one knows what will happen tomorrow. Now that airbag will keep our daughter out of jail. While the coffee brewed, I tried to remember what I knew about Senor Ramirez. A man in his 60s who owns several houses in town that he rents out. Said to be pretty tough on business, but fair. If he's suing for 8 million, the damage is serious. The whole house burned down. The roof, the walls, the furniture, the whole interior. 8 million for a completely destroyed house is a realistic sum. The coffee was just starting to boil when there was a knock at the door. I knew it was Felicita. My neighbor always came in around 10 in the morning to chat before going to the market to sell vegetables. She had her own small plantation outside of town, and she brought fresh tomatoes, cucumbers, and herbs to the market every day. Come in, I shouted, not leaving the stove. Felicita entered as usual without further ado. We'd been friends for 15 years, ever since she'd moved in next door after her husband died. She was 4 years older than I was, but she looked younger maybe because she hadn't had children and didn't know all the anxieties that motherhood brings. Or maybe it was just her easygoing nature. Estella, what's the matter? She asked at once, looking closely at my face. You look as if you had seen a ghost. Felicita had always been able to read people. Probably this quality helped her in trade. She knew at once which customer was ready to pay how much. I poured her coffee into a blue cup, which she considered her own, and told her everything. Felicita listened in silence, only occasionally shaking her head and clicking her tongue. When I finished, she was silent for a long time, sipping her coffee and looking out the window at the mango blossoms. 8 million, she finally said, slowly setting the cup on the table. Estella, that's your entire savings. I know. Everything you've saved all your life. I know. And you're really going to give away every last peso? I looked at her surprised. How could it be otherwise? What's left for me? It's my daughter. Your daughter who hasn't called you in 6 months just to see how you're doing. Your daughter who only comes here when she needs money. And now you need money again. A lot of money. Felicita's words hurt because there was truth in them. Indeed, in recent months, our relationship with Yolanda had become strained. She called rarely, came even less often. When I asked her about her life, she answered in one word. Normal, everything is fine, I'm working. And Oswaldo. I never really knew him. They'd been married 2 years, but he never bothered to talk to me. He was always silent, nodding and trying to get away as fast as he could. Even at the wedding, he hardly spoke to the guests. Felicita, whatever's between us, she's my only daughter. I can't let her go to prison. Of course you can't, but use your head. 8 million is all you have. After that, you'll be left with only your pension and sewing income. And you're 58 years old, Estella. At your age, it's too late to save again. I hadn't thought of it before, but Felicita was right. I am indeed 58. If I give away all my savings now, I'll live the rest of my life on my pension and occasional earnings. What if I get sick? What if I can't sew anymore? In my old age, I'm risking poverty. Listen to me, Estella. Felicita leaned across the table to me and took my hand in hers. I'm not saying you shouldn't help children. Of course you should. But maybe you don't have to give absolutely everything. Maybe we should talk to this Ramirez guy, maybe try to negotiate an installment plan, or find a good lawyer who can reduce the amount of compensation. Yolanda said they've already talked to a lawyer. A plaintiff's lawyer, I guess. Do they have their own? A defense attorney? I realized I don't know. In the panic of my daughter's call, I didn't think to ask the right questions. But Felicita was right. They need their own lawyer to protect the interests of Yolanda and Osvaldo. You know what? Felicita continued, letting go of my hand. When they arrive, put them at the table and find out all the details. What exactly happened? Who assessed the damage? Whether there are witnesses? What documents they showed them? Maybe it's not as hopeless as it seems. In the meantime, don't rush to give the last of your money. Get to the bottom of the situation first. But if I don't help them, they'll go to jail. Estella, they could go to jail either way. Arson is arson, even if they get compensation. It's not just about the money. I hadn't thought of that. It's true that the criminal case is still pending, Even if compensation is paid, the court may still impose a sentence, but at least it'll mitigate the sentence. After Felicita left, I went back to sewing, but my thoughts kept returning to the phone call. Yolanda sounded really scared, but something in her voice confused me. Some kind of insincerity? Or was there something she wasn't telling me? Or maybe I was just making it up out of excitement. I tried to remember the last time I saw my daughter. 3 months ago, at Easter. She came with Osvaldo for a day. We had lunch, talked about all sorts of things. But the conversation was superficial, as if between strangers. Yolanda seemed nervous and looked at her watch several times. Osvaldo, as usual, hardly spoke, only nodded and smiled strainedly. They left early, saying they had business in town. Around noon, I went to the bank to find out the exact amount in the account. The bank was in the center of town, and the trip took about 20 minutes on foot. The clerk, a young girl in a strict suit, politely printed out a statement. 7,643,000 pesos. Money that Rafael and I had saved all our lives together, and then I continued to save alone. Every peso was earned through honest labor. Every peso set aside with the hope of a peaceful old age. On the way back, I stopped by a jeweler to see how much they would give me for my mother's earrings. Don Carlos, an old acquaintance of Rafael's, examined them carefully through a magnifying glass. "The gold is good," he said. 875 proof. The work is fine. Antique. 400,000 ladies. Maybe more, if there's a suitable buyer. Then I have exactly 8 million. Exactly the amount I need for compensation. It's as if fate has decreed that I have exactly what I need to save my daughter. No more, no less. In the evening, as I was preparing dinner for myself, simple rice and vegetables, the phone rang again. "Mom, we're leaving tomorrow morning," Yolanda said. Her voice sounded calmer than it had in the morning. "By a train that comes at 2 o'clock in the afternoon." "Okay, I'll meet you at the station." "No need, we'll take the bus. We have a lot of things." "A lot of stuff?" I was surprised. "Didn't you say the house burned down?" "Well, yes, but we managed to get some things out. And then we had clothes we'd given to the laundry, books that Osvaldo had left at a friend's house. All sorts of things." The explanation seemed strange to me, but I didn't ask for more details. "Mom, have you thought about the money?" Yolanda asked, and there was tension in her voice again. I have the right amount." "You do? All 8 million?" "Yes, savings plus Mom's earrings, that's 8 million. Mom, you're the best." There was genuine relief in my daughter's voice. "I knew you wouldn't leave us." After the conversation, I walked around the house, figuring out where to put my daughter and son-in-law. The house was small 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room, and a tiny bathroom. I lived in 1 bedroom, and in the 2nd bedroom, I kept sewing supplies, fabrics, threads, buttons, everything I had accumulated over the years. Yolanda's old bed, on which she had slept as a child and teenager, was also there. I would have to vacate the room immediately and move the sewing machine and materials into the living room. All evening I cleaned, preparing the house for the arrival of guests. It was strange to think of my own daughter as a guest, but that's how I felt. Yolanda had long been a stranger to me, someone who called occasionally and came even less often. And Osvaldo was almost a stranger. I moved the sewing machine into the living room, cleared out the closet in the former nursery, and changed the linens. The bed squeaked. I'd have to ask Osvaldo to fix it. Since he was a mover, he should know how to fix it. He rarely offered to help around the house, though, even when he came to visit. Late that night, I sat in the kitchen, drinking tea and thinking about tomorrow. 8 million pesos. All my savings. All my financial security. Tomorrow I'll give it to save my daughter from prison. Am I doing the right thing? Felicita thinks it's not. But what can I do? I can't live peacefully knowing that Yolanda is in prison. I went to bed late, but I couldn't sleep. My thoughts ran through my head like laundry in a washing machine. Tomorrow, Yolanda and her husband would arrive, and I'd have to give the money. All the money. After that, my life would change forever. They arrived on Friday at 4 o'clock sharp, as promised. I heard the noise of the engine in the yard and looked out the window. An old cab with dirty sides was stopping at my gate. The driver was shouting something to Osvaldo, waving his arms, apparently haggling for luggage. I stepped out onto the porch and gasped. One suitcase after another was being pulled out of the trunk. 4 large suitcases, 2 bags, and a box of some kind. Was this really all they had salvaged from the fire? For people who had lost their home, they had a surprising amount of stuff. Mommy! Yolanda rushed to me and I smelled alcohol. Not strong, but noticeable. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Daughter. I hugged her, trying not to show disappointment. How was your ride? It was okay. The train was half an hour late, and then we had to wait for the bus. Yolanda looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, her hair sloppily gathered into a ponytail. Osvaldo paid the driver without looking in my direction. He was a tall, thin man with a perpetually grim expression. Even now, when I was sheltering them, he didn't bother to say hello. Osvaldo, hello, I said as he came to the porch with 2 suitcases. Hello, Donna Estela, he mumbled, not looking up. We dragged the bags into the house. The suitcases were heavy, stuffed to the brim. I couldn't help but ask, Yolanda, didn't you say that the house burned down almost completely? Well, yes. My daughter avoided to look me in the eyes, but we managed to take something out. And then, not everything was in the house when the fire happened. The explanation didn't sound convincing, but I decided not to insist. We put them in the vacated children's room. Yolanda looked around and grimaced. It's a little cramped. But it's safe, I said dryly. And free. Osvaldo silently began to sort through the suitcases. From one of them, he took out a bottle of rum, almost full. For my nerves, he explained, noticing my gaze. That evening, as we sat in the kitchen eating dinner, I decided to find out more about the incident. Yolanda, tell me what happened. She looked at her husband and began reluctantly. We came home late at 11 o'clock. Osvaldo bought a bottle. We drank. How much did you drink? Well, I don't remember exactly. Then we had a fight about something stupid. It was about money, Osvaldo said. She spent her paycheck on some crap. What kind of shit? I asked. Cosmetics, clothes. She didn't leave me any money for cigarettes. Yolanda flared up. I don't have the right to spend my money? Our money. Osvaldo raised his voice. I saw the same argument between them that had apparently led to the fire. It was unpleasant to watch the scene. Enough, I said firmly. Go on with your story. Anyway, we had a fight, Yolanda continued, and then we made up. Osvaldo was smoking, watching TV. I was in the bathroom. When I came out, he was already asleep on the sofa, and the cigarette had fallen and was smoldering in the gap between the cushions. And you didn't notice right away? I'd had a drink too. I was sleepy. I went to the bedroom. I woke up to smoke. The story was getting clearer, but also sadder. They got drunk, had a fight, and then Osvaldo's carelessness led to disaster. The next morning, a policeman came to see us. A young Sergeant Rodriguez, whom I had known as a boy. He lived across the street at his aunt's house. Doña Estela, he said politely, I need to speak to your daughter and son-in-law about the accident. Yolanda and Osvaldo were sitting at the kitchen table, not looking well, their hangovers making themselves felt. So, the sergeant took out a notebook. Tell me again what happened on Wednesday night. Yolanda repeated yesterday's story, but the sergeant asked clarifying questions. How much alcohol was consumed? I don't remember exactly. Neighbors said they heard screaming, furniture crashing. Was there a fight? Yolanda hesitated. Osvaldo was staring at his desk. A little fight, the daughter finally admitted. A fight so bad that they knocked over a coffee table and broke a vase? The sergeant read from his notebook. Witnesses say the noise lasted about 40 minutes. I was horrified to realize that my daughter had lied to me. It wasn't just an argument, it was a real drunken brawl. Sergeant, I intervened. How serious is the damage? Serious, Donna Estela. The roof, 2 walls, all the furniture and personal belongings of the tenants were burned. The house will have to be demolished and rebuilt. And the compensation is really $8 million, according to the appraisal. Senor Ramirez provided all the documents, receipts for building materials, photos of the house before the fire, expert reports, so the amount was real. Fortunately, I have that money. After the policeman left, I was alone with my daughter and son-in-law. Osvaldo went to the yard to smoke, and Yolanda sat next to me. Mom, you'll help us, won't you? Of course I will. I have the money we need. You do? She sounded hopeful and relieved. Yes, savings plus Mom's earrings. That's exactly 8 million. Mom, you're a lifesaver. But my daughter's joy seemed superficial. It was as if she was sure in advance that I would help. Monday morning, I went to the bank to withdraw the money. The clerk was surprised when I asked for the whole amount in cash. Doña Estela, it's dangerous to carry such a large sum. I know, but you have to. The money came in a big envelope, a thick wad of bills. I looked all the way home, fearing robbers, holding the bag tightly to me. Then I went to Don Carlos to sell my earrings. The old jeweler examined them carefully and offered 400,000 as he had promised earlier. Times are hard now and gold is not doing well, he said. But I will make a good price for you. I agreed. 400,000 plus 7,600,000, exactly 8 million. When I returned home with the money, Yolanda and Osvaldo were sitting in the living room, whispering about something. When they saw me, they stopped talking. Here. I put 2 envelopes on the table. 8 million. Yolanda grabbed the envelopes and quickly counted the money. It's exactly 8, she confirmed with relief. Mom, Osvaldo said to me directly for the first time. Thank you. We won't forget. But there was no gratitude in his voice. It sounded more like a matter of course. The next day, we went to Señor Ramirez's house. He lived in a 2-story house next to the church and kept it in perfect order. Señor Ramirez, a neat man with glasses, met us in the living room. I'm listening, he said dryly. We've come to pay the compensation, I said, and placed the envelopes of money on the table. Señor Ramirez carefully counted all the bills. It took about 15 minutes. 8 million, he finally confirmed. That's right. He put the money in the safe and wrote out a receipt for the compensation. So, he said, returning to the table, the property damage has been fully compensated. That's good for you. The court will take it into account when passing sentence. Will there still be a verdict? Yolanda asked fearfully. Of course it will. Arson by negligence is a criminal offense. Compensation is just a mitigating factor. And what kind of punishment are we looking at? With the damages paid, probably probation. 1.5 years probation. It was better than jail, but it was still unpleasant. We went home. Yolanda and Osvaldo stayed with me. They had nowhere else to go. I had given all my savings to keep them out of jail, and now they were my regular guests. They were quiet at first, even helping around the house. Yolanda cooked, Osvaldo fixed the squeaky bed and the leaky faucet. They seemed grateful for the help, but it didn't last long. Within a week, Osvaldo started coming home from work drunk. Not really drunk, but drunk. He said he had a right to relax after a hard day, and Yolanda started complaining about her job, about her salary, about life being unfair. She said that all her friends lived better, and she had to live in her mother's small house. Yolanda, I said to her one day, have you forgotten that you could be in jail right now? I haven't forgotten, replied the daughter. But that doesn't mean I have to feel guilty all my life. I should feel grateful. Mom, you're my mother. Shouldn't a mother help her children? She should, but the kids should appreciate it. I do. But I could hear in her tone that she took my help for granted. A month passed. Yolanda and Osvaldo settled into my house, took over the children's room, arranged their things. Gradually, they began to behave not like guests but like hosts. Osvaldo played music at full volume. Yolanda threw her makeup all over the bathroom. When I made remarks, they said they had to live somewhere and had no choice. You do have a choice, I said. You can get a room or an apartment. With what money? Yolanda asked. I barely have enough money to eat. Then act like guests in someone else's house. Mom, this is my childhood home. I grew up here. So I should respect the rules of this house. But they didn't. Every day they thought more and more of my house was theirs. And then the drinking started. Osvaldo started drinking more and more. Yolanda started drinking too, first occasionally, then regularly. I realized I'd made a mistake. Giving all the money for compensation had saved them from prison, but I had turned them into freeloaders. They didn't appreciate my sacrifice. They felt they owed it. I ran out of money, no more savings. All I had left was my pension and my sewing income, and the house was inhabited by two grown men who thought the world owed them something. 2 months passed like water through my fingers. At first, everything seemed relatively normal. Yolanda went to work at the store. Osvaldo loaded bags in the warehouse, and in the evenings they sat at home watching TV or listening to music. I sewed orders in the living room. I never returned the sewing machine to the bedroom, as there was no room there now because of my daughter and son-in-law's things. At first, they even tried to help around the house. Yolanda sometimes cooked dinner. Osvaldo took out the trash a couple of times, washed dishes, but it didn't last long. After a couple of weeks, they stopped bothering with household chores, apparently thinking that since they lived for free, it was enough. And then the problem started. First, I noticed that Osvaldo started coming home later than usual. He was reluctant to answer questions. He had been delayed. He had a lot of work to do. The bus took a long time, but he sometimes smelled of alcohol. Not strong, but noticeable. Osvaldo, have you been drinking? I asked him one evening at the end of the first month. No, he mumbled, not looking me in the eye. Don't lie to me, I can smell it. I had a beer with the boys after work. What's the big deal? With what money? A friend gave it to me. Yolanda was quiet, pretending to watch TV, but I could see she knew more than she was saying. I could tell from her tense look that this was not the first time. As the days went by, the situation worsened. Osvaldo started drinking more often, first once a week, then twice, then every other day. He didn't get drunk, but he came home drunk on a regular basis. He found money for alcohol somewhere, even though his salary was small. Where do you get the money to drink? I asked him in the middle of the second month when he came home with clear signs of alcohol consumption. What do you care? He snapped at me. My business is that you live in my house, eat my food, and spend your money on vodka. I'm working. Osvaldo raised his voice. I work every day and you're telling me what to do. You work, but you drink your wages instead of saving for a rented house. What rented accommodation? Yolanda intervened. Mom, you know we don't have money for rent. We will if you stop drinking. We are not alcoholics, her daughter flared up. But I could see that she was beginning to drink too. Not as often as Osvaldo, but regularly. Sometimes I found empty bottles in their room, even though they tried to hide them. By the end of the second month, the situation became critical. Osvaldo drank almost every day. He came home drunk, scowling, answering all questions rudely. One day he came home completely drunk, staggering, talking slurred, smelling of cheap rum. Where did you get the money for the booze? I asked him sternly. What do you care? He yelled so loudly that I flinched. I'm a grown man. I can drink if I want to or not. The point is you're living in my house and acting like a pig. Leave me alone, old woman! Osvaldo shouted and swung at me. I backed away, frightened by the sight of him. His eyes were red, his face angry, his hands shaking with anger and alcohol. Yolanda ran out of her room at the scream. What's going on here? Your mother got me, growled Osvaldo, always telling me what to do. Osvaldo, calm down, said Yolanda, but her voice was shaking. It was obvious that she was afraid of her husband in such a state. I will not calm down. I'm sick of living here like a prison. And he left for work, slamming the door so that the window shook. That was the beginning of the end. From then on, scandals became a regular occurrence. Osvaldo came in drunk, snapped at any remarks, threw his dirty clothes anywhere, didn't wash for days. He stank so badly that I had to keep the windows open even in cooler weather. Meanwhile, Yolanda started missing work. First, she said she was sick. Then she said she had a headache. Then she just stopped explaining. I could see that she was drinking too. She smelled of alcohol in the morning. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking. Yolanda, what's going on with you? I asked her one morning when she once again decided not to go to work. Nothing is happening to me, she answered in a slurred voice. I just don't feel well. You feel bad because you drink. I don't drink. Don't lie to me, Yolanda. I'm not blind. So what if I drink sometimes? My daughter flared up. I have stress, problems at work. What kind of problems? The headmistress is nagging me. She says I've become inattentive. Have you become inattentive? Maybe. I don't know. I saw my daughter lying. Her problems at work weren't because of her boss's nagging, but because of alcohol. When a person drinks in the evening, the next day their head doesn't work, their hands are shaky, their attention span is scattered, and my fears were confirmed sooner than I expected. At the beginning of the third month, Yolanda came home in tears. I was fired, she said, collapsing on the couch. For what? For absenteeism and neglect. The headmistress said I hadn't been doing a very good job lately. Why haven't you been doing a good job? I don't know, Yolanda shouted. Maybe it's because I'm under a lot of stress. What kind of stress? That we don't have our own house, that we have to live with you, that we have no money. No money because you're drinking it away. We're not alcoholics. But it wasn't true. In 2 months, they had become alcoholics. Maybe not chronic, but people who couldn't live a day without a drink. A week after Yolanda was fired, the worst happened. Oswaldo lost his job too. Why were you fired? I asked him when he came home in the middle of the day with a grim face. For being late, he mumbled. Late a lot? Sometimes. Because of a hangover? None of your business. But it was clear from the look on his face that it was a hangover. Now they were both unemployed. Yolanda was at home all day. Oswaldo did nothing. And yet they kept drinking. Where do you get the money for alcohol when you're both out of work? I asked them one night. We borrow from friends, Yolanda answered. What friends? All kinds of friends. How much do you owe? Not much, but I suspected they owed a lot. Alcohol costs money, and they didn't have any. The days were a nightmare. Unemployed, they stayed at home all day drinking and fighting, not only among themselves but also with me. Any remark I made was met with a violent reaction. Yolanda, take the bottles out of the living room, I said one morning. You do it yourself. My daughter snapped at me. These are your bottles, and this is your house. You want it clean, you clean it yourself. I don't have to clean up after grown people. And we don't have to live by your rules. These fights happened every day. They stopped thinking of me as the lady of the house and themselves as guests. In their understanding, they had the right to live here and do what they wanted. And then the trouble with the neighbors started. Oswaldo started playing music at full volume, especially when he got drunk. The neighbors complained, but he didn't respond. Oswaldo, turn the music down, I asked him. The neighbors were complaining. Don't let them listen, he yelled back. I have the right to listen to music in my house. It's not your house. Whose is it? Yours? You said yourself that you gave all the money to help us. So now you have no right to tell us what to do? It was a wild logic, but it's useless to argue with a drunk man. And then one day, something happened that completely ruined everything. I was in the vegetable garden, watering tomatoes, when I heard screams from outside Felicita's house. I ran to see what had happened and saw a terrible picture. Oswaldo was standing in the middle of my neighbor's yard with a shovel in his hands. He was drunk out of his mind, staggering around, eyes crazy. Felicita pressed herself against the wall of the house, her face white with fear. Osvaldo, what are you doing? I shouted, running up. That old hag is pointing at me, he growled, waving the shovel. She says I'm a drunk and a debauchee. I only asked you to turn down the music, Felicitas said in a shaky voice. I have a headache from your noise. I don't care about your head, shouted Osvaldo and swung the shovel at Felicita. Felicita shrieked and shrank back. I rushed to Osvaldo and grabbed his arm. Stop this at once, I shouted. He turned to me, eyes completely crazy. And you too. I'm fed up with everyone. Everyone's telling me what to do. He tried to pull his arm out, but I held on tight. We fought for a few minutes. Oswaldo was stronger, but drunk, so I was able to wrestle the shovel from him. Get out of my yard, I shouted. Now! Osvaldo stood there, breathing hard and swaying, then staggered toward the house, muttering curses. Felicita sat on the ground, shaking with fear. Felicita, are you okay? I helped her up. Estella, she whispered. He's crazy. He wanted to kill me with a shovel. I'm sorry, I said, feeling a burning shame. I didn't know he could do that. Estella, it's dangerous. He's dangerous to everyone. What if next time he actually kills someone? I didn't know what to say. Felicita was right. Oswaldo had become uncontrollable and violent. The alcohol had turned him into a beast. I took Felicita into the house, gave her water, tried to calm her down. But I realized that the situation had gone too far. In the evening, I decided to have a serious talk with my daughter. Yolanda was sitting in the kitchen, also quite tipsy. Osvaldo was asleep in their room, passed out from the day's debauchery. Yolanda, we need to have a serious talk, I said, sitting down across from her. About what? She asked indifferently, not taking her eyes off the rum glass. About your behavior. You've both been out of work for a month, drinking every day, and today Osvaldo attacked Felicita with a shovel. So? Yolanda shrugged her shoulders. So what? He could have killed her. But he didn't. My daughter's indifference struck me to the core. Had the alcohol changed her so much that she no longer understood the seriousness of what was happening? Yolanda, what happened to you? You've become a completely different person. Nothing happened to me. It's just that life is so shitty. What life? You live for free, eat my food, use my house. So what? Yolanda flared up. Whose fault is it that we don't have our own house? Whose fault is it that we had to pay $8 million? It's your fault. You got drunk and burned down someone else's house. Who are you to judge us? The daughter's voice became angry and aggressive. A saint? A saint? I'm the one who gave all my savings to keep you out of jail. Mom, you're our mother. Shouldn't a mother help her children? She should, but children should be grateful. Grateful? Yolanda laughed a drunken laugh. Grateful for what? For living in someone else's house and listening to your instructions? For not being in jail? What's the difference? Prison or this life? It's still not a life. I realized that the conversation had reached an impasse. My daughter saw herself as a victim of circumstances and me as to blame for her problems. Yolanda, I said as calmly as I could, you can't go on like this. Either you stop drinking and look for a job or look for another place to live. Threatening? Squinted at my daughter. I'm not threatening. I'm just explaining the situation. And if we don't leave, then I'll be forced to take action. What kind of measures? Yolanda's voice has a mocking tone. Call the police? Then they will tell us that we are your children and we have the right to live in our parents' house. I didn't think of that. It was not legally easy to kick adult children out of the house, especially if they had no other place to live. At that moment, Osvaldo came out of the room, disheveled, red-eyed, but more or less sober. What are they arguing about? He asked hoarsely. Mama is throwing us out, said Yolanda. Kicking us out? Osvaldo grinned. Where are we supposed to go? That's your problem, I said. Our problems? Osvaldo sat down at the table next to his wife. And who got us into these problems? What do you mean I got you into trouble? You burned the house down. And who made us pay the compensation? Yolanda intervened. You could have refused. We could have gone to jail. Yolanda! I couldn't believe my ears. You're accusing me of saving you? You didn't save me. You made me dependent. Now we owe you a lifetime of gratitude. You don't owe me anything. Just act like normal people. We are acting normal, said Osvaldo. It's you who are acting abnormal. Pointing, commanding. I tell you the rules of behavior in my own house. In your own house? Yolanda and Osvaldo looked at each other. And who are we? Strangers? Your guests. What guests? Yolanda was indignant. I was born and raised in this house. This is my childhood home. So you must respect it. I respect it. But I'm not going to live by your rules. Then find another place to live. We won't, Osvaldo said calmly. No money, no job. We'll live here. I won't let you. What will you do? He grinned. Throw us out by force? You feeble old woman. Those words hurt because there was some truth in them. I was 58 years old and physically weaker than they were. Osvaldo, don't talk to my mother like that, Yolanda said suddenly. What about her? Snapped at her. She took us in and now she is in charge. She saved us. Saved us. Saved us from what? From prison? We're in another prison now. What prison? A prison of constant orders and complaints. They started arguing with each other. I listened and realized that the situation was out of control. In 2 months, my daughter and son-in-law had turned into alcoholics and debauchees. The scandal went on for over an hour. They were yelling at each other, then at me, then at each other again. By the end of it, they were both furious. You know what, Mom? Yolanda finally said, breathing heavily. Osvaldo and I have decided. Decided what? You have to move out of here. I didn't understand. Move out how? Find another place to live. Rent a room or live with Felicita. Yolanda, what are you saying? This is my house. It was yours, and now it's ours. Why should it be? Because we live here and you've been giving us orders. I couldn't believe this was my daughter talking. The daughter I gave up my life savings for. Yolanda, are you kicking me out of my own house? I'm not kicking you out. I'm explaining the new rules. What rules? We're staying here and you're looking for another place to live. Where am I going to live? I don't know. That's your problem. Yolanda! I couldn't believe what was happening. How can you say that? It's easy. I'm sick of your nagging. What nagging? I asked you not to drink, not to be disorderly, to get a job. That's right. I told you what to do. Because this is my home. No, Osvaldo intervened. It's our home now. On what grounds? On the grounds that we live here and you can't kick us out. I can. It's my house and I have the right to decide who lives in it. Try it, said Osvaldo, grinning. We'll see what happens. I stood there, unable to believe what was happening. My daughter, for whom I had sacrificed everything, was kicking me out of my own house, and her son-in-law was supporting her in this. Yolanda, I said, trying to get at her conscience, I gave you all the money. Everything I had. Don't you understand? I do. Thank you. Now go away and get out of our lives. That was the end of the conversation. They went to their room, and I was alone in the kitchen, trying to make sense of it. My daughter was kicking me out of my house, the house my husband built, the house I'd lived in my entire adult life, kicking me out after I gave her all my savings. That night, I couldn't sleep in my own house. After talking to Yolanda and Osvaldo, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, trying to figure out what had happened to my life. The daughter I had given birth to and raised, the daughter for whom I had given up all my savings, was kicking me out of the house. It seemed like a nightmare, but unfortunately, it was reality. From their room came drunken voices, laughter, the clinking of bottles. They were celebrating their victory over their mother. Every now and then, I heard my name in their conversation, but I couldn't make out the words. Most likely, they weren't saying anything nice about me. Around midnight, I grabbed a pillow and blanket and lay down on the couch in the living room, sleeping on the same couch where I had recently sat at my sewing machine, earning money to save them. The irony of fate was cruel, but falling asleep didn't work. My mind was spinning with thoughts of what to do next. Yolanda and Osvaldo had made it clear that they were not going to leave. Moreover, they demanded that I leave. I had become an unwanted element in my own home. In the morning, while they were still asleep from last night's drinking, I quietly packed the essentials into a small bag. A few changes of underwear, medications, papers, some money left over from the last sewing orders. I had nothing else. All my savings had gone into saving my daughter from prison. When Yolanda woke up and came into the kitchen with a hungover face, I was sitting at the table with my bag ready. Are you leaving? She asked indifferently, pouring herself some water. I'm going to Felicité's, for a while. For how long? Until you come to your senses. Yolanda snorted. That's a long time to wait. Yolanda, this is crazy. You're kicking your own mother out of the house. No, I'm not. You chose to leave. After the ultimatum you gave me. Mom, my daughter sat across from me and looked me straight in the eye. You have to understand a simple thing. We are not little children anymore. We are adults, and we have the right to live the way we want to live. In my house, by my rules. Then live alone, and we'll live here according to our own rules. Yolanda, think about what you're saying. I'm your mother. I gave you all the money I've saved all my life. Thank you. We won't forget. But that doesn't give you the right to tell us how to live our lives. The conversation had reached an impasse. The daughter was adamant. 2 months of alcohol and idleness had turned her into an alien, cruel person. I got up, took my bag and headed for the door. Mom, Yolanda called out to me. Don't think we don't love you. We just need space to live. Space to drink, I corrected. Call it what you want. I walked out of the house that had been my home for over 20 years. A lot had happened here over the years, happy and sad. Yolanda had been born here. Raphael and I had been happy here. I had been alone here after his death, and now I was being kicked out of this house by those for whom I had sacrificed everything. Felicita met me at her gate. She must have seen me packing. Estella, what happened? They kicked me out. Kicked you out? How? I told them about the conversation we had last night. Felicita listened, shaking her head. Ungrateful bastards, she said at last. After all you've done for them. Felicita, can I stay with you for a few days? Until I decide what to do next. Of course, Estella. Stay as long as you need. Felicita's house was like mine, small, neat, and tidy. She'd given me the little room where her late husband used to live. There was a narrow bed, an old closet, and a small table. It was modest, but clean and quiet. Thank you, I said, setting my bag on the floor. You're welcome. We've been neighbors for 15 years. I'll pay for the room. Don't be silly. What kind of payment between friends? The day passed quietly. Felicita went to the market to sell vegetables, and I stayed at home, thinking about my situation. Through the window, I could see my house. Yolanda and Osvaldo didn't show their faces. Apparently, they were sleeping off yesterday. In the evening, when Felicita returned from the market, we were sitting in her kitchen drinking tea. Estella, said her friend, have you thought about what you're going to do next? I don't know. I hope they'll come to their senses and leave on their own. And if they don't? Then I don't know. Estella, they won't. Trust me. Why would they leave when they can live for free in a nice house? But it's my house. Of course it is. And that's why you have the right to kick them out. Kick them out how? They're my children. Grown children, who act like parasites. Felicita was right, but I didn't know how to solve the problem. Just come in and force them out? It's unrealistic. They're young and strong, and I'm alone. The night was restless. I lay on the narrow bed and thought about my life. 58 years, and this is the result. No money, no home, kicked out by my own daughter. Is this how the life of a person who always tried to do the right thing ends? Around 2 a.m., I was awakened by the loud clinking of broken glass, then laughter and drunken voices. I got up and went to the window. Yolanda and Osvaldo were standing in the yard of my house. Both drunk out of their minds, swaying, shouting something. There were stones lying next to them, and a hole in the window of Felicita's house. One pane was broken. Felicita! Shouted Osvaldo, waving a bottle. Come out, you old witch! We know you're turning our mother against us, added Yolanda, also holding a stone. Felicita woke up to a noise and came running into my room. Estella, what's going on? They are throwing stones at your windows. We looked out the window. Osvaldo picked up another stone and threw it towards the house. It hit the wall next to the kitchen window. Felicita, get out! He yelled. Let's talk like human beings! We'll show you how to tune up our mom! Yolanda shouted. Felicita grabbed the phone. I'm calling the police. Don't! I stopped her. It's my daughter. Your daughter is throwing rocks at my house. I don't care who she is. But as we argued, the drunken troublemakers tired of their entertainment. Osvaldo threw the last stone, which hit the fence, and they went back into the house, laughing loudly and shouting something. See, said Felicita, this is what they have come to, throwing stones at the windows of their neighbors. I'm sorry, I said, feeling a burning shame. I'll pay for the broken glass. It's not the glass, Estella. It's that they've gone completely insane. Today they throw stones, tomorrow what? They'll set the house on fire? I didn't know what to say. My daughter and son-in-law's behavior was really becoming more and more inappropriate. The rest of the night we didn't sleep. We sat in the kitchen, drank tea, and discussed the situation. Estella, Felicita said in the morning, you have to make a decision. Either you return your house, or they will finally settle there. Return it how? They won't leave willingly. Then we have to make them leave. How do you do that? Get a lawyer. It's your house. You have the right to evict anyone living in it without your consent. But they're my children. Grown children who are acting like criminals. Estella, they threw rocks at my house. That's hooliganism. Felicita was right. Yolanda and Osvaldo's behavior was out of line. Where do I get a lawyer? And with what money? I know a lawyer. Dr. Cordero, he has an office downtown. He's a good housing lawyer. And the money? Felicita stood up, walked over to an old sideboard, and pulled a small box out of a drawer. Inside was money, not a lot, but enough. Here, she said, holding out the bills to me. 300,000 pesos, enough for a consultation. Felicita, I can't take your money. You can and you should. You can pay me back when you get the house back. And if I don't? You will. I believe in you. The money felt heavy in her hands. 300,000 was a lot of money for Felicita. She must have been saving it for a long time. Thank you, I said. I'll be sure to pay you back. I know. Now get dressed. We're going to see Dr. Cordero. The lawyer was in a small office on the second floor of an old building downtown. Dr. Emilio Cordero was a man of about 45, neatly dressed, with attentive eyes behind his glasses. I'm listening to you, he said, as we settled into the chairs across from his desk. I told the whole story from the beginning, from the fire to yesterday's incident with the rocks. Dr. Cordero listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. So you own the house? He asked when I was finished. Yes, I have all the papers. Are your daughter and son-in-law registered in the house? No. They lived in rented accommodation and moved in temporarily after the fire. How long have they been staying with you? 2.5 months. And all that time without your consent to live here permanently? Yes, I took them in temporarily and they decided to stay permanently. Dr. Cordero nodded. The situation is clear. By law, you have every right to evict them from your home. How do you do that? First, send them a formal notice to vacate. If they refuse, you can sue them. And the court will back us up? Absolutely. The house is yours. They don't own it and have no right to stay. Plus, their antisocial behavior is an additional argument. How long will it take? If they don't leave voluntarily after notification, the court will consider the case within a month. Then the execution of the decision, another week or two. And how much will it cost? Consultation and notification, 200,000 pesos. If it goes to trial, another 300,000. I only had the money Felicita gave me, but I had no choice. Okay, I said. Draw up the notice. Dr. Cordero took a piece of paper and began to write. Half an hour later, the document was ready. A formal notice to vacate the apartment within 7 days of receipt. Hand it to them personally, the lawyer said, handing it to me. If they refuse to sign, bring witnesses. And if they ignore the notice, then sue. You'll have full grounds. I paid 200,000 for my services and took the notice. The document was on official letterhead, stamped by a law firm. It looked impressive. We got home in time for dinner. Felicita went straight to the kitchen to prepare food, and I sat at the table and looked at the notice. Will it really come to the point where I have to evict my own daughter through the courts? When will you bring it? Felicita asked, putting a bowl of soup on the table. Tonight. Let them be sober so that everyone understands. What if they refuse to take it? Dr. Cordero said to bring in witnesses. Would you be willing to be a witness? Sure. Just be careful with them. Yesterday they were throwing rocks. Today they might fight. I watched my house from Felicita's window this afternoon. Yolanda and Osvaldo didn't come out, probably sleeping off the night's debauchery. In the evening, I saw Osvaldo go out into the yard for a smoke. It's time, I said to Felicite. Let's go. We walked up to my house. The door was open. Yolanda was sitting in the kitchen eating something. When she saw us, she was surprised. Mom, what do you want? To give you a document. What document? I took out a notice and handed it to my daughter. Read it. Yolanda took the paper and ran her eyes over the text. At first, she read calmly, but then her face changed. What is it? She asked when she had finished reading. An official eviction notice. Eviction? Yolanda jumped up from her seat. Mom, are you out of your mind? No, I am of sound mind and good judgment, and I demand that you vacate my house. What house? We're your children. Grown children who are acting like thugs. At that moment, Osvaldo came into the kitchen. What's all the noise? Mom sent us an eviction notice. Yolanda showed him the paper. Osvaldo took the notice, read it, and laughed. Really? Do you think this paper will scare us? It's an official document from a lawyer. I don't care about your lawyer. Osvaldo defiantly tore the notice in half. That's what I think of your threats. Osvaldo! I exclaimed. You realize this is serious, don't you? I don't understand anything, he shouted. I understand only one thing. We live here and we'll live here. You won't. I'll sue. Sue? Yolanda laughed, picking up the scraps of paper. Let's see what the court will say when it finds out that the mother wants to throw the children out on the street. The court will say that the house is mine, and I have the right to decide who lives in it. And we'll tell the court that you invited us to live here, Osvaldo added. Temporarily invited us, after the fire. We'll have to prove it. And you don't have a piece of paper with a time limit. They were right about one thing. There was no written agreement on temporary residence. It was all a matter of words. Felicita, you're a witness, I turned to my friend. You heard how they tore up the official notice. I heard, confirmed Felicita. And I saw it. Good, said Osvaldo indifferently. Let him testify. It won't make any difference. Mama, added Yolanda, stop this circus. We're not going anywhere. Get used to it. I won't, I said firmly. I'm suing tomorrow. Sue. They all said the same thing. Felicita and I left. The notice was torn, but I had a witness. Dr. Cordero said that was enough to file a lawsuit in court. In the evening, I sat in Felicita's kitchen and thought about tomorrow. I would have to go to a lawyer again, pay money I didn't have, and sue my own daughter. Has it really come to this? Had the woman I'd given birth to and raised become my enemy? But there was no choice. Either I got my house back or I was going to be homeless in my old age. The court heard the case faster than Dr. Cordero had promised. Just 3 weeks after the lawsuit was filed, Yolanda and Osvaldo had to vacate the house within 7 days. The judge took into account that I owned the house, that they were living there without a written agreement, and Felicita's testimony about their antisocial behavior. Now we have a legal basis for eviction, Dr. Cordero said when I came to him with the court's decision. If they don't vacate the house voluntarily, we'll get the bailiffs involved. And if they refuse again, then the bailiffs have the right to use force, with the police if necessary. I brought the court order to Yolanda in person. She was sitting in the courtyard on an old bench that Raphael had made, drinking beer straight from the bottle. It was only 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Here, I said, handing her a document. The court order. Yolanda lazily took the paper and read it. Her face didn't change. And so? She asked indifferently. So what? You have a week to move out. And if we don't, the bailiffs and the police will come. Yolanda laughed. Mom, do you really think the police will evict children from their parents' house? This is not my parents' house. It's my house, and you're living in it illegally. We'll see. She shrugged her shoulders and sipped from the bottle. Osvaldo was sleeping in the house at that time. I could see him through the open bedroom window. He was lying on the bed with his clothes on, snoring, drunk again in the morning. A week went by and they wouldn't move out. On the contrary, they began to behave even more defiantly. Osvaldo went out into the yard several times and shouted in the direction of Felicita's house, Well, old toads, where are your police? And Yolanda was demonstratively hanging laundry on a rope, as if she wanted to show all the neighbors that she was not going anywhere. On the 8th day, I went to see Dr. Cordero again. They haven't vacated the house, I reported. Expected. Now we're going to the bailiffs to enforce the judgment. The lawyer called the bailiff service right in front of me. The conversation was short. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning, he said, hanging up the phone. The bailiff and the police will be there. You must be there to confirm your housing rights. What if they resist? The police have the right to use necessary force to enforce a court order. I hardly slept that night. I lay on the narrow bed in Felicita's room and thought about tomorrow. Would it really come to the point where the police would forcibly remove my daughter from the house? But there was no choice. They had made it clear that they would not leave voluntarily. In the morning, Felicita made strong coffee and made me eat breakfast. Eat, she said. You'll need your strength today. Felicita, what if something goes wrong? Nothing's going to go wrong. You have a judgment. The house is yours. The law is on your side. But this is my daughter. Your daughter is acting like a criminal. Forget about family ties. At 10:15, a bailiff's car and a police car arrived at the house. Out of the first came a man in uniform with a folder of documents, Chief Bailiff Morales, as he introduced himself. From the second, two uniformed policemen. Doña Estela? The bailiff asked. Yes. Do you have the deeds to the house and the judgment? I showed the documents. The bailiff scrutinized them. Everything is in order. Let's proceed with the execution of the judgment. We approached the house. The door was locked from the inside, the windows too. But I knew that Yolanda and Osvaldo were at home. I had seen them looking in the windows when the cars came. The bailiff knocked on the door. Open up! Bailiff service! There was no answer. Yolanda Amaris, Osvaldo Mendieta! The bailiff shouted loudly. According to the court order, you are obliged to vacate this residence. Open the door immediately. A muffled laugh came from the house. Then Osvaldo's voice. Go to hell! Last warning, shouted the bailiff. If you don't open the door voluntarily, it will be forced open. Try it, replied Osvaldo. The bailiff turned to the policeman. Open it. One of the policemen, a stout man in his 40s, went to the door. First he tried it for strength, then he took a step back and kicked the lock with his foot. The door trembled, but held. Again, said the bailiff. The policeman kicked harder. This time the lock did not hold, and the door swung open. Immediately there were shouts from inside the house. Get out! This is our house! We're not going anywhere! The policeman entered the house. I heard them talking to Yolanda and Osvaldo, explaining the situation. Then the voices got louder and there was an argument. We have the right to live here, Yolanda shouted. You don't have any rights, replied the policeman. There's a court order to evict you. And I don't give a damn about your decision, yelled Osvaldo. This is my wife's house. It belongs to your wife's mother. She has the right to evict you. Nobody's going to evict us. The bailiff signaled me to stay outside and went into the house. Through the window, I saw him showing Yolanda and Osvaldo the documents and explaining something, but they kept shouting and waving their arms. Then the situation escalated sharply. I heard the crash of falling furniture, shouting, cursing. Osvaldo was shouting furiously. Yolanda was crying and shouting too. You have no right, screamed the daughter. This is lawlessness. We are citizens of this country, roared Osvaldo. We have rights. Your rights end where the owner's rights begin, the bailiff replied calmly. A few minutes later, a second policeman came out of the house. We need backup, he said into the radio. The citizens are actively resisting. After another quarter of an hour, a second police car arrived with two officers. Now there were 4 policemen in the house and a bailiff against 2 drunken troublemakers. But Yolanda and Osvaldo did not give up. They locked themselves in the bedroom and shouted threats. If you come in, you'll be sorry. We have guns. We will defend ourselves. The last threat made the police officers take the situation seriously. They called in additional forces and surrounded the house. Come out with your hands up, shouted a senior officer. Otherwise the door will be stormed. We're not going anywhere, replied Osvaldo. This is our home, added Yolanda. The policeman waited for another 10 minutes. Then the senior officer gave the command. Break open the bedroom door. The bedroom door was barricaded from the inside. They had propped it up with a closet. The policemen had to break it down with their shoulders. When the door finally gave way, Yolanda screamed from the room. For the next few minutes, I heard only the noise of the struggle, shouting, rumbling, cursing. Osvaldo was shouting furiously, clearly struggling. Yolanda was crying and shouting, Let him go! Don't touch my husband! Then Osvaldo's voice became muffled. Apparently, he was being restrained. Let go! He wheezed. I'll sue you! You will sue from your cell for resisting the authorities, the policeman replied calmly. Half an hour later, they started taking things out of the house. The policeman came out first, leading Osvaldo under their arms. His hands were handcuffed behind his back and his face was broken, as if he had resisted to the end. I'll sue you all, he shouted, trying to get away. This is illegal. It's illegal. Behind him, Yolanda was being led. She was crying and sobbing, but she did not resist. Mommy, she shouted when she saw me. Mommy, how could you? I didn't say a word. What could I say? You threw your own daughter out on the street. Yolanda continued through her tears. Your only daughter. You threw yourself out, I said quietly. No, you betrayed us. After all we meant to you. What did you mean to me? I couldn't stand it. Drunkards and debauchees who turned my house into a den? We're your children. You are strangers to me. Yolanda was put in a police car. Osvaldo continued to rage, so they took him to the station to be booked for resisting the authorities. For the next 2 hours, the police and the bailiff took things out of the house. 4 large suitcases with which they had once arrived, plus a few more bags and boxes of things they had accumulated during their stay. Where do you want it? The bailiff asked. Outside, I answered harshly. Let them decide what to do with them. The things were put in the yard, next to the gate. The bailiff drew up an act of forced eviction, and I signed the documents. The case is closed, he said. The house was returned to its rightful owner. The cars drove away. I was alone in the yard of my house looking at the pile of other people's things at the gate. Felicita came to me. Well, Estella, how are you feeling? I don't know, I admitted. It's strange. Let's go and see what they've done. We entered the house. The first thing that caught our eye was the broken door. The lock was completely destroyed. The door jamb was cracked. We're gonna have to replace the whole door. It got worse. There were empty bottles, cigarette butts, leftover food in the living room. They'd moved my sewing machine into a corner and piled it with their stuff. There were some stains on the couch, probably spilled alcohol. The kitchen looked even worse. There was a sink full of dirty dishes, a burned pot on the stove, and scraps and garbage on the floor. The refrigerator was on the fritz. The door was ajar, and everything inside was rotten. Oh my God, Felicita whispered. How did they get the house so messy in 2 months? The bedroom where they lived was in a disastrous state. The linens were dirty, clothes, bottles, trash on the floor. The closet was open, things piled outside. The room smelled heavy with the odor of unwashed bodies and alcohol. Estella, it's going to take you a week to clean this up, Felicita said. I'll be fine, I said, though I was horrified at the extent of the destruction. The bathroom was in need of a cleanup, too. The sink had rust stains, the tub was dirty, and there was mold on the floor. The mirror was cracked, probably thrown into something. We went through the whole house. The damage was significant but not critical. The main problems were dirt, stench, and a broken front door. Everything else could be cleaned up. Well, Felicita said, shall we start cleaning? Tomorrow, I answered. Today I just want to be in my house. Felicita understood and left. I was alone in the house that was mine again. First I opened all the windows. I needed to air out the rooms from the heavy odor. Then I picked up the biggest trash, bottles, cigarette butts, leftovers. At least so I could walk around the rooms normally. In the living room, I put the sewing machine back in its original place, removed other people's things from the couch. Gradually, the room began to look familiar. When it got dark, I turned on the light and sat in Raphael's old chair. The same chair where he liked to read the newspaper in the evenings. The chair I had sat in after his funeral, trying to get used to being alone. Now I was alone again. But it was a different kind of loneliness. Not a mournful loneliness like after my husband's death, but a bitter loneliness. The loneliness of a woman betrayed by her own daughter. I sat in Raphael's chair and thought about the past months. How I'd given all my savings to save my daughter from prison. How I'd taken her and her husband into my home. How they turned into alcoholics and troublemakers. How they kicked me out of my own home. And how I had to call the police to get my place back. Is this really how a mother-daughter relationship ends? A trial and a forced eviction? The house was quiet. The lights of the neighbors' houses shone outside the windows. Other families lived their lives. And I sat alone in my house, which was finally mine again. It was painful. It was embarrassing. It was scary to think about the future, but it was mine. And that was the main thing.